If you've never done anything with digital embroidery before, then this is the video for you. In this video, we're going to discuss the basic things about digital embroidery so that you can decide if this is going to be a hobby for you or something that you would like to pass on. The first thing to consider when you're looking at digital embroidery is file type. So your files that you print out on your embroidery machine are different according to what type of embroidery machine that you have. If you have a Brother embroidery machine, then you will be working with PES files or PES files. If you are working with a Janome, then you will be working with Jeff. And it varies depending on what brand of machine that you have. Now, there are a few exceptions to this because there are a few machines that take universal file types like Burnett B70. I can print a Jeff or a PES or a Huss or any of those other file types on that particular machine. Now you must be wondering, where do I get my files from? Well, you can either buy files online or you can make your own files using a purchased embroidery software. Now, there are pros and cons to each approach. If you are buying files, over time that's going to cost you more money because each time you want to print something different, you have to buy a new file. Now, there are a few places where you can get free embroidery designs, but those things are few and far in between at times. And you're limited in what you can print and cannot print. Now, if you make your own files, there are limitless possibilities. You could literally go through your photo album and pick out some photos and decide that you want to digitize those and turn those into an embroidery design and have an embroidery design based on the picture that you found, which is great. However, you must learn software and you must also learn how to do digital embroidery in order to be able to do that. And that is pretty time-consuming thing to learn how to do, but once you learn it, you always have that skill. Now you must be wondering, well, how do I get my files from the computer to the embroidery machine? Well, once you have either purchased or made your embroidery file, then you just take a thumb drive and transfer the designs over to your embroidery machine. Some embroidery machines don't take thumb drives, but they take SD cards. Same likeness. You just put your SD card in and transfer that over to your embroidery machine. Now you'll have to use your embroidery machine manual to learn how to get into your thumb drive to extract the files, because it's a little different for each machine, but most of them are pretty simple and straightforward to use. Once you get your files from your computer to your embroidery machine, you'll need to consider what supplies that you will need in order to print the design. The first thing that you are going to need is interfacing. Interfacing is just like a paper that goes underneath your embroidery to prevent the stitches from shifting out of place while the machine is stitching, and it also keeps your material stable so it doesn't move as well. There are two different types of interfacing. You have cutaway interfacing and then you have tearaway. Cutaway interfacing is used for items that you wear on your body, like a t-shirt or a hat. It keeps the material stable. The next thing to consider is your tearaway interfacing. Tearaway interfacing is what you use on everything else, and that's all the things that you don't wear on your body. They come in three different types: lightweight, medium, and heavy. Your lightweight interfacing is used when you have a design that is not very dense, or when you have a material that is pretty stable and doesn't need a ton of interfacing. Now, if you are printing a design that is very, very dense, then you would need to use a heavyweight stabilizer. Likewise, if you're using a material that is very flimsy or has a lot of body and movement to it, you would want to use a heavyweight interfacing. Me personally, I save a few dollars by using medium weight interfacing on everything. And then if I need to use a heavier weight interfacing, I simply attach another layer of medium interfacing to the back of the other medium interfacing and just print the design that way, and it works just fine. And that just saves me money on having to buy multiple types of interfacing. The next thing that you would need is a spray adhesive to affix your interfacing to your fabric. And personally, I like 505 temporary spray adhesive. However, I know that some people like to use just plain glue stick, just a washable glue stick, to attach their material to the interfacing. You have your standard sewing machine needle, and then you have your embroidery needles. The only difference between the two is the size of the eye of the needle. An embroidery needle has a larger eye because it allows the thread to pass through more easily with less opportunities for there to be snags. And when you get a snag in your thread, then you have to stop your embroidery machine and move back to the stitch before that happened and re-stitch out that part of the design so that no mistakes show up in your finished product. It is perfectly fine to use a standard sewing machine needle, but I often find it better to just use embroidery needles for embroidery. Now you have ballpoint needles and you have universal needles. Ballpoint needles are used when you're working with like a jersey fabric or a stretchy type fabric that will get messed up with the standard universal needle. Other than that, you'll pretty much use universal needles for everything. Now, as far as needle size is concerned, the main size needle to use for embroidery is a size 11 needle. If you are, however, printing out a font or text that is small, then you will want to go down to either a size 9 or a size 8. The next thing to consider is your thread itself. There are two different types of thread as well. You have your standard sewing machine thread, and then you have your embroidery thread. Embroidery thread is thinner than standard thread, and standard thread tends to be thicker because it is used to hold seams together. Now you would want to only use embroidery thread for embroidery because embroidery thread is thinner, which makes it easier to stitch out your design. But also embroidery threads are more vibrant than standard sewing machine threads, so your design will really pop if you use a embroidery thread versus using a sewing machine thread. However, I have seen some people do stitch out designs with standard sewing machine thread. It just depends on what you're going with or going for in your design. The last thing to consider when you are starting out with embroidery is your fabric. The fabric is whatever it is that you want to print on, and it has limitless possibilities. Really, I've seen people print on everything from car mats to clothing. There's really limitless possibilities with this, and that's pretty much all that there is to digital embroidery. Now, I would say that embroidery is something wonderful to get into if you love wearing embroidered items or if you just love embroidery in general. However, it is not a cheap thing to get into because you have to consider all the supplies that you will need, as well as the machine and the software that you will need to complete projects. But I would never discourage someone from going into digital embroidery because it's a fun hobby and it also can be quite lucrative. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe.